There comes a day when every player decides they want to try being the game master, but that transition can be super daunting. Welcome to Tabletop Empire, my name is Nate, and today I hope to give you everything that you need to start GMing and to help you give your PCs a fun experience. In this video, I'll be covering a few topics to help you become the best GM that you can be. These topics are getting into the mindset of the GM, making sure that your PCs are having fun, and also how to plan a campaign and then run it. At the very end, I have some cool channel updates for anybody interested. So getting into the mindset of the GM, the first thing we need to do is change the way you view the role of the GM. There's a few key aspects that may not be intuitive to GMing, but they'll save you a lot of time, effort, and save you from eventual burnout. To briefly touch on these aspects. Number one, the GM is not responsible for the story. It is the group's job to make the story. This is a collaborated story game, not the GM's role-played novel. The GM is just another player at the table. Sure, the GM comes up with the story premise and some major key plot points, but the PCs are responsible for driving the story as well as playing into their characters' goals and motivations. Later in the video, I'll be going over how to plan a campaign with this in mind. The most important thing here is to make sure your PCs have strong goals that can drive the story forward if it hits a slump. Number two, you the GM should not be spending hours session planning from session to session. Initial campaign planning may take a little bit of time, but after that you should not be spending 8 hours planning a 4-hour session. I used to do that, by the way, and I advise against it. Instead, come up with a general idea with where you want the story and the plot to go, and a few ideas for where it could go, and have a few NPCs or enemies on hand to use when needed. Let the player decisions in the moment drive where the story goes. This in turn will make the PCs feel like they have an agency in the story and motivate them to stay engaged. Since it is your first time GMing, it may take some practice to come up with stuff on the fly, and your PCs will probably be patient as you step into that role. Almost nobody's able to do it amazingly at first. Just keep doing it and you'll get better at it. For Star Wars RPG, there's a site called Stugoff. I'll have a link down in the description, but that has every enemy and NPC from the books listed there with all of its stats and everything, and that should save you a ton of time on planning. Now, the biggest tip that I can think of for improving your sessions is to try to think through your world beforehand, at least the parts the players could explore. This could happen while you're in the car or at lunch or in the grocery store. Be thinking about the world your players will be on and what's there and what it'll be like. Then if they try to go down a rabbit hole, you already have an idea of what could be there. Now, this isn't creating like an elaborate map in your head, but it's thinking of some stuff that they may find or run into and what the experience may be like. And number three should be a huge relief on you first-time GMs. The GM doesn't need to know all the rules. That comes with time. The PCs should also have some level of understanding, and the table as a whole can come together on knowing the game mechanics. If nobody at the table knows the rule, you at the GM can set the rule for that session, then later, after the session ends, the table can together try to find the rule in the book. Just don't pause the game for 15 minutes to find the rule. Keep the game moving. If you not knowing a rule ended up screwing over one of your players, you can make it up to them in some way next session. The best way to learn the rules though is through my beginner's guide series on Star Wars RPG. Also, a Genesis RPG beginner's guide series is coming very soon to the channel, so subscribe if you want to see that as well as more Star Wars RPG content. If you want more details on this topic of the GM mindset, I actually have a full video on it. Link is down below and I'll have a card up in one of the corners. The next aspect to GMing is making sure the PC is having a fun time. The big idea here is that the PCs should all be having fun, and that it's more important than any rulebook rule, any Star Wars universe rule, or even the initial session idea you had planned. Trust me, when your PCs are having fun, you will be having fun. I read this post on Reddit this past week about a player who joined a group as a droid, and the GM was making their experience miserable in the name of droids in Star Wars are not autonomous and free beings. I hope I don't need to spell out why that is bad GMing. As a GM, you want to maintain a power balance between the players and make it fair for all, so don't be a yes man for everything, but at the same time, try to say yes to as much as you possibly can without breaking the game, because you want the players to have fun. Giving your players the leeway to make or do something cool, even if it's unorthodox, even if you have to bend a few rules to do it, will create amazing moments that everybody will remember. This is, by the way, what we GMs refer to as the rule of cool. And finally, planning a campaign. But first, if you're enjoying the video so far, please blast a like. It helps the video reach more people. So first, you will need to decide the theme of your campaign. If this is for Star Wars RPG, your choice here will determine which core rulebook you want to use. If you want to run a more criminal or underworld or even civilian type game, then you'd use Edge of the Empire. If you want to run a Jedi or Sith based game, you can run Force and Destiny. or if you want a Rebellion versus Empire story, you would go with Age of Rebellion. I would recommend asking your players which they would prefer as well, and try to decide all together on which setting to play in. You can combine books, though to make this work seamlessly, I would say every player gets obligation or every player gets duty, and the Jedi characters can have the additional conflict or morality system added on. So at this point you have the theme of the story, but you want to come up with what the generalized big story will be. So one example is my current at-home campaign for Age of the Empire. The players are hired by Hutts to infiltrate and assassinate high-ranking members of the Crimson Dawn. They can only reach this official by working their way into the bottom of the Crimson Dawn's ranks and then upwards until they are high enough to come in contact with their target and eliminate him, thus setting off a gang war that the players can directly determine the outcome. The thing with this idea is that there's a strong start point and a strong end point. Everything in between is malleable and up to how the players want to approach the challenge. How they get there could also affect how the ending plays out and where the story goes afterwards. You may be stuck on trying to come up with a strong idea with a start and end point, and I can relate because it takes me a while to come up with something too. You can use books or movies or anything you enjoy as inspiration for the story. Another option may be controversial, but please hear me out until the end of this paragraph and then let me know if you disagree. You can always ask ChatGPT like 10 ideas for Star Wars tabletop RPG campaigns set in the Rebellion against the Empire. And then, change the prompt a few times, you get a bunch of varied ideas, and this is the important part: do not just take one of the ideas at face value and run with it, because they probably suck. Instead, what they can do is they can spark your imagination and give you a launching point to come up with your own ideas. Or maybe you're just a naturally gifted storyteller who comes up with ideas super easy. Must be nice. When it comes to session planning, I typically write down like 1 to 3 things I maybe want to happen that session as my input for the story, as well as maybe the opening dialogue to get the players in the mood, set the scene, and start the game. Everything else is purely reactionary to the players' decisions, and if they get stuck, you can use one of the things you wrote down as a way to push the story along. Or maybe their decisions set up what you already planned anyways. Or sometimes you may not use at all the things you wrote down, and that's just kind of the nature of the game. Now, I know the open-endedness of this all can be really daunting, but it's really not as scary once you actually start doing it, and the more you do it, the easier it becomes. If you have any questions at all, please drop them down below. I do my best to answer them all. Blast like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and a huge thanks to the Patreon supporters for making the channel possible. If you want to support the channel and our upcoming live play, stream, and podcast, check out Patreon. It's the best way to help fund the channel and its ongoing costs. My plan is to get this channel campaign started hopefully January 2025. And a slight side tangent, but channel announcement that I mentioned earlier, I am now in a house with good internet and a studio space to make videos, which is fantastic. This also means that channel members and Patreon supporters are now much more helpful than ever with providing funds for me to spend money on the channel with products to review and better gear, because I have a mortgage now. Oh, and 3 months away from having a second child. So everything that you support me with does not really go towards my cost of living. Everything you support me with goes directly back into the channel. So all the people subscribed and helping support the channel financially are literally just pouring money back into the channel for it to be able to grow and do better and cooler things. Videos should be back to roughly every 1 to 2 weeks schedule. Thanks to everybody for the patience as we settle into our new home. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys in the next video, but until then, and as always, may the Force be with you.